All right, let's dive in. Today, we're tackling your notes.
Oh, wow.
On stakeholder communication in instructional design. You know that struggle to get everyone on the same page, subject matter experts, project managers, make sure a project actually launches. Without, losing your mind, we're going to arm you with some strategies to handle those communication roadblocks.
I like it. Untangling communication knots. That's what we're doing.
Exactly. So you highlighted this right at the start. Stakeholders, they often just don't get how instructional design works.
Yeah.
Like, what are the real-world consequences of that disconnect from your experience?
Oh, it's huge. It's like somebody trying to bake a cake.
Okay.
But they don't know flour from baking soda. You get something kind of cake-shaped, but it's not going to be good.
Yeah.
Or even work. That's what happens. Missed deadlines, feedback that makes no sense.
Ugh, tell me about it.
And the final product just totally misses the mark.
That's it. I've been in those feedback sessions, like we're all looking at the same thing, but speaking different languages. And you also mentioned, there's often no real structure for the communication.
Oh, yeah.
It's just chaos, like herding cats.
Exactly. Without a framework, communication just goes everywhere. And studies actually show that projects, when they have clear communication from the start, they meet their goals and they stay on schedule way more often.
Okay, so structure is key. But how do we actually build that? You've got 6 strategies outlined.
Yeah.
The first one, establishing clear objectives. Seems basic, but what are the pitfalls?
It's so easy to just assume everyone's on the same page.
Right.
But defining your objectives clearly, that's the most crucial thing. It's not just what you want to achieve. It's a shared vision that everyone actually buys into. And that means going beyond vague statements like,
improve employee training.
Exactly. We need laser focus.
So get granular. You're talking about SMART goals. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Yes. Using SMART goals makes sure everyone knows what success looks like and how to get there.
Yes, I love it.
A practical tool is a project charter template to capture those objectives. A formal document, like a contract of understanding.
Love that. Sets the stage for accountability right away. Now, you're a big advocate for regular check-ins. Why are those so important? What makes a good check-in?
Proactive communication, that's what I'm all about. It's your early warning system. But it's not just scheduling meetings.
Right.
It's making them count. Incorporate visual aids. Things like progress dashboards, even simple timelines can keep everyone focused and aligned.
That's a great tip. I'm all about visuals, too. You mentioned using, flow diagrams to map the project structure.
Yeah.
Those aha moments right there in the meeting room.
Absolutely. A good visual beats 1,000 words, especially with complex stuff. I once showed a client a visual timeline.
Oh, nice.
It connected all the project phases.
Oh.
And she was like, now I get it. Like a light bulb.
Those are the best. Okay, let's move on. Structured feedback mechanism. So official feedback forms. I'm all about streamlining, less information overload.
Me too.
Yeah.
Structured feedback is like a filter for all that information.
Yeah.
Instead of drowning in emails and random comments, you create a clear channel for the feedback that's actually helpful and focused. A well-designed form guides stakeholders. They give constructive input, aligned with the goals.
So it's making feedback valuable, not just noise.
Exactly. It makes things transparent, fair, everyone knows their voice matters, prevents those "why wasn't I consulted" blow-ups later.
That is gold. All right, so clear objectives, regular check-ins, structured feedback, but conflicts will happen. You've got collaborative problem solving as a strategy. What does that actually look like?
Well, first of all, conflict is normal. It's not a failure. It means people care.
Yeah.
But instead of letting it fester,
you
got to create a safe space for those debates, healthy debates.
I like that. See conflict as an opportunity, not a threat. So structured meetings where different viewpoints are encouraged.
Precisely. These meetings aren't about blame. They're about finding the root cause of the disagreement and solutions. You can use techniques like active listening or conflict resolution frameworks to make the discussions productive. Remember, you're not just about content, you're also fostering a collaborative environment. Everyone needs to feel heard and respected.
Taking notes. Next level skills. Okay, last strategy, educating stakeholders on the design process itself. Why is this so important? Especially for folks outside our world.
We're demystifying the magic. Remember that knowledge gap?
Yeah.
Well, one way to fix it is to give stakeholders a peek behind the curtain. It's not about jargon. It's about a clear overview of how it works. the phases, the reasons behind the choices you make.
So empowering them to be real partners, not just receiving the final product, which leads to more realistic expectations and buy-in from the start.
Exactly. When they understand the why, they trust you more, and their feedback is better, aligned with the goals.
Perfect. We've got those 6 strategies down, but now let's get specific. You've got notes on subject matter experts, the content gurus. What makes working with them unique?
Ah, yes, the SMEs. Full of knowledge. But that relationship can be tricky.
Why is that? What makes it so tricky?
One of the biggest hurdles is the curse of knowledge.
Okay.
They know their stuff so well, they forget what it's like to be a novice.
They think, oh, everyone knows this complex theory.
Yeah. And then the materials are way too advanced for the learners, full of jargon, missing those basics that make it all click.
So how do we bridge that? More than just saying dumb it down, right?
Yeah.
How do we help them translate their expertise into something that learners actually get?
That's where your skills shine. You're like a translator,
Yeah.
helping them break it down into manageable pieces. One technique I like is the Feynman technique.
Like the physicist.
Yeah, Richard Feynman. It's all about simplifying complex ideas. Like, imagine you're explaining it to a kid. You have to strip away all the jargon, the complicated language. Get to the core and keep it simple.
So it's a reality check for the SME. They see if they're assuming too much about the learner's knowledge.
Exactly. And in that process, you usually find those missing pieces that make understanding a concept so much easier. Also, encourage them to use analogies, real-world examples.
I love analogy.
Me too.
Yeah.
That's how you connect to the learners' lives. Make it relatable, not just abstract.
Right. It's those aha moments when something complex suddenly makes sense because you've connected it to something you know. But guiding SMEs that way, it takes some finesse, right?
It does. Remember, communication goes both ways. Listen to them actively, ask questions, and really make sure you understand their perspective. Build a rapport, that sense of trust where you both feel comfortable challenging each other's ideas.
It's finding those bridges from the experts' world to the learners and making sure they're strong enough for everyone to cross. But let's be real. Even with the best intentions, you get conflicting feedback from different stakeholders. It's a tug of war.
Oh, yeah. The SME wants more depth. The project manager's watching the deadline.
Right.
And maybe the learners even chime in. You're juggling, trying to please everyone.
So much pressure.
Yeah.
How do you handle that when everyone wants something different? It's like walking a tightrope.
The thing is, everyone's coming from a different place, and usually those different viewpoints happen because they don't have a shared understanding. So the first step is to acknowledge and validate everyone.
It's not agreeing, it's just showing you've heard them.
Exactly. Then you can start looking for common ground, the shared goals, anything non-negotiable. What can be compromised? It's like finding the overlap in a Venn diagram.
I love that visual, and I'd imagine being transparent is crucial throughout this whole process.
Oh, absolutely. Keep everyone in the loop about the decisions and why you're making them. You can't always make everyone happy, but if they understand the why, they're more likely to accept it. And sometimes, for tough decisions, it helps to have a framework.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. What kind of framework? Something practical I can use.
Definitely. You could use a weighted matrix. You give points to different criteria based on how important they are. Like if meeting the learning objectives is top priority,
Right.
that gets more weight than staying strictly within budget.
So it's a scoring system to help you make decisions objectively when you're caught between those competing priorities.
Right.
I love it. Takes some of the emotion out and keeps you focused on what matters most. Speaking of tricky situations, you also mentioned setting boundaries with stakeholders,
Yeah.
especially those in authority. That's a tough one.
It is. It requires assertiveness, but also diplomacy.
Yeah.
But trust me, setting those boundaries is so important for you and for the project. You are the expert in instructional design. Don't be afraid to own that.
So confidently own your role. Push back when you need to. But how do you do that without being confrontational, especially with higher-ups?
It's all about framing your communication. Be assertive, but respectful. For example, if a stakeholder wants something that just won't work for learning, don't be afraid to explain why.
So not just no, but here's why this won't work, and here's what we can do instead. You're the problem solver.
Exactly. And setting boundaries also means being clear about your time when you're available.
Oh, I feel that one deeply. The scope creep, the unrealistic deadlines.
That's why you need clear agreements about the project scope, the timelines, how you'll communicate. And it's okay to say no or to negotiate deadlines. Protect your time so you can do your best work.
It's about boundaries for you and the project. And honestly, you're modeling those healthy habits for your stakeholders, too.
Absolutely. It sets the standard for good collaboration where everyone's time and skills are valued. Now let's shift a bit and talk about feedback. Giving and receiving it, it's kind of scary, right?
Oh, it is. Feedback's valuable, for sure, but it can be nerve-wracking, especially when you're on the receiving end.
Definitely. But the right mindset makes all the difference. It becomes a tool for improvement for you and the stakeholders. Let's start with giving feedback. How do you deliver it so it's helpful and actually well received?
Okay, spill the secrets. Nobody wants to give feedback that just falls flat.
Right. First rule, be specific.
Yeah.
Don't just say, this isn't working. Give concrete examples, like point to a specific slide or a phrase in a document.
So they know exactly what you're talking about. Okay, what else?
Focus on the behavior, the work itself, not the person. So instead of, you're being too vague,
Right.
I'm having trouble understanding this. Can you clarify?
It's a request, not an attack. That feels so much better.
Yeah.
I also like to start with the positive, the feedback sandwich.
Oh, yeah. Starting with something good sets a positive tone. Shows you're not just there to criticize. And make sure your feedback is timely. The sooner the better.
Address issues as they come up, not let them fester. Makes sense. But receiving feedback, that's a whole other beast. Any tips for handling that? Especially when it's not what you want to hear.
The key is to check your ego at the door.
Oh, boy.
And really listen. Don't interrupt. Don't get defensive. Try to see their point of view, why they're saying what they're saying.
Putting your feelings aside and absorbing what they're saying, even if it stings.
It's not easy, but it's how you learn from feedback. And ask questions to make sure you understand.
So dig deeper. Don't just brush it off because it's uncomfortable.
Right. Remember, the feedback's about the work, not you. It's not about your worth as a person.
Detach your self-worth from the feedback. That's a powerful reframing. What about when you totally disagree with the feedback?
Even then, try to see it as a new perspective. Maybe you're missing something. It's that growth mindset, being open to learning, even when it's tough.
So maybe, just maybe, there's something valuable in there, even if it doesn't feel good. And speaking of valuable, documentation's important, right? It might not be sexy, but it can save you when it comes to stakeholder communication.
Oh, documentation's your best friend, especially when things get messy. It's all about transparency, and that builds trust with your stakeholders.
Okay, so what should we be documenting when it comes to feedback?
Think of it like a comprehensive log. Everything goes in there. Emails, comments from meetings, even notes on sticky notes. Write down the date, who gave the feedback, and a summary of the main points.
So it's not just capturing it, but creating a clear trail for reference.
Yes. This is so important for making decisions. Document the decisions you make based on that feedback and the reasons why you made those choices. Then you have a transparent record of how it was all handled.
It's your safety net, your proof. And speaking of potentially intimidating stakeholders, you've also got some notes on executive sponsors, the folks holding the purse strings. I imagine that's a whole different ballgame.
You're right. They're crucial, but they're busy people. No time for details. So how do you communicate effectively and efficiently?
Let's talk strategy. How do we tailor things for them to connect with their needs and priorities?
First, respect their time. Keep it concise. Bullet points, summaries, visuals, anything that gets the key information across quickly.
Right.
Remember, they think big picture, so focus on the impact, the return on investment, how it all connects to the organization's goals.
It's connecting your work to their world, showing the value you bring.
Exactly. And be ready for their questions. They're business-minded. They want to understand the why behind your decisions.
So be prepared to explain and defend your choices.
Yes. Keep them in the loop on progress, but don't overload them. High-level updates, key milestones, major roadblocks. Find that balance,
Highlights reel, not the director's cut. Makes sense. Now, managing expectations. We've all been there, stakeholders, with, overly optimistic views on what's possible, given time and budget.
Oh, I know. Managing expectations is so important. And it starts with setting realistic goals and timelines. But you have to be transparent about the whole process.
So we're pulling back the curtain and showing them how it all works.
Yes. Explain how instructional design works. The phases, the potential problems, what a realistic timeline looks like. Be honest about limitations, challenges, the resources you need.
So set realistic expectations from day one. No sugarcoating, because that leads to disappointment later.
Exactly. And put those expectations in writing, in a project charter or scope of work document. That prevents misunderstandings and soap creep.
It's a formal agreement, not just a conversation. That adds clarity and accountability. And I imagine communication throughout the whole thing is key too.
Definitely. Regular updates, highlighting the wins and the challenges. And don't be afraid of those tough conversations if things need to change. Timelines, scope, whatever it is.
Be honest and transparent even when it's uncomfortable. And if they ask for something outside the scope, be ready to push back.
Absolutely. Manage that scope creep and stick to the plan. And here's a good rule: under-promise and over-deliver.
Words to live by. Any final thoughts on stakeholder communication before we move on?
Well, it's not one and done. It's a continuous process. You're building relationships, fostering trust, and keeping those lines of communication open.
Make communication a priority, not an afterthought. It makes everything smoother.
You got it. When you put in the effort, you create a foundation for collaboration, for being innovative, and for making learning experiences that are truly impactful.
Perfectly said. Now, before we move to our next topic, let's touch on a specific type of communication. Those difficult conversations. We all dread them, but they happen.
Oh, yeah. The ones that make you sweat a little. They happen when you have strong personalities, conflicting priorities, or those stakeholders that, well, they just know how to push your buttons.
So how do we approach them to make them productive, respectful, and a little less scary?
Choose the right time and place. Not a quick chat in the hallway or a busy meeting where everyone's distracted.
So a safe space, physically and emotionally, for an open and honest talk.
Exactly. Go in with a positive attitude, ready to listen.
So assume good intentions. Try to see their perspective, even if you're frustrated.
Yeah, it's not about being a pushover. It's about making productive dialogue possible. And use I statements.
Instead of "you're wrong," it's "I'm concerned about this because..."
Exactly. It's about understanding, not blame. And remember, you're looking for solutions, not dwelling on the past.
Collaborate to find a way forward, a path that works for everyone.
Exactly. And be ready to compromise. You won't always get everything you want, but a solution that works for everyone is better than no solution.
That win-win situation where everyone feels heard, even if there are concessions.
Yes. If things get heated, take a break. Come back later. Sometimes a little space helps to clear the air.
Cool down before you can talk productively.
Exactly. And if you just can't agree, bring in someone neutral, a mediator. They can help you find a solution everyone can live with.
Like a referee, keeping things fair and productive. Now, shifting gears, let's talk about celebrating successes. It's easy to forget to do that, right? We get so caught up in the daily grind.
Oh, for sure. But celebrating is so important for morale, motivation, for the whole team dynamic. It reinforces what leads to success.
So how do we celebrate well in instructional design projects? Make people feel appreciated and motivated.
Start by recognizing individuals. Publicly acknowledge those who went above and beyond. A shout out in a meeting, a thank you note, maybe a gift card to their favorite place.
Make people feel seen and appreciated.
Exactly. And celebrate milestones as a team. Completing a big phase, launching the final product, whatever it is, team lunch, a virtual happy hour, even just taking a minute at the end of a meeting to reflect.
Creating that shared sense of pride and ownership. I love it. What about celebrating the actual impact? Sometimes we forget to zoom out, you know?
Yeah, we need to remind ourselves our work matters. Share stories about how the training made a difference in people's lives or helped the organization.
Connect it to the bigger picture. Showcase the value you've created. That's motivating.
Absolutely. Now, building relationships with your stakeholders, it's not just the work, it's the people too.
Right. It's people working with people. How do we build those genuine connections that make communication better and more fun?
See them as human beings. Get to know them. Ask about their interests, their families, their goals.
Show genuine interest, not just seeing them as stakeholders with a list of demands.
Exactly. Find common ground, something you can connect on.
Find those points of connection. Build rapport. Make it more relaxed. What about when you just don't see eye to eye with a stakeholder?
Even then, respect their time, their opinions, their position. It's not about being a pushover. It's about being professional, even when you disagree.
Treat everyone with courtesy, regardless of their title or opinion. And being responsive to their needs helps build trust.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Respond to their questions and concerns quickly and helpfully. Show that you value them and you're there to support them.
Be reliable. That builds strong relationships. But what about being proactive? Don't just wait for things to happen. Drive the conversation.
Yes. Don't wait for them to come to you. Check in, provide updates, share your ideas, stay on their radar, show initiative, be transparent.
Keep the lines of communication open. Be an active participant. And, sometimes those conversations turn into conflicts. It's unavoidable, right? But it's how we handle it that matters.
Absolutely. Conflict is a part of life.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't have to be a bad thing. When we approach it constructively, it can actually lead to innovation and better decisions.
Okay, I like that perspective. So how do we see conflict as an opportunity? What are some strategies for navigating those tough spots?
First, listen to everyone involved. Understand their perspectives, what motivates them, what's at the root of the conflict.
Seek to understand before being understood.
Exactly. You don't have to agree, just validate their feelings. Then you can look for common ground, shared goals, areas of compromise, win-win solutions.
Like finding that overlapping section in the Venn diagram and clear communication through it, right?
Be assertive, but not aggressive. Express yourself clearly and directly, but be respectful of their perspective.
Stand your ground, but professionally.
Right. And if you're stuck, bring in a neutral third party, someone who can help you communicate and find a solution that works for everyone.
A fresh perspective can unlock things. Now, let's talk about communication planning. It's not enough to just communicate. We need to do it strategically, right?
Exactly. It's like creating a roadmap for your communication.
Yeah.
So your messages are clear, consistent, and reach the right people at the right time.
Okay. Walk me through the key elements, the must-haves.
First, you have to know who you're talking to for each message. What do they need? What do they expect? What information is relevant to them?
So know your audience, tailor the message to them.
Right. And then define your objectives. What are you trying to achieve with each message? Inform, persuade, motivate, get feedback. Be clear on your purpose.
So have a clear why for each communication, and then craft those key messages.
Exactly. They have to be concise, clear, and memorable. Sound bites, not paragraphs.
Cut through the noise. Deliver information that sticks. And these days, there are so many ways to get those messages out there. How do we choose the right communication channels?
That's where knowing your audience comes in. Some prefer email, others like face-to-face meetings or online platforms. It's about understanding their preferences and adapting.
Be strategic, use a mix of channels to reach everyone effectively, and having a timeline helps keep things on track.
Absolutely. A communication timeline keeps you organized and makes sure messages are delivered at the right time, like a publishing schedule.
Okay, so we've got our audience, objectives, messages, channels, and timeline. What's the last piece of the puzzle?
The last, but definitely not least, is monitoring and evaluating. Don't just send messages into the void. We need to know if they're working. Are they being understood? Are we achieving our objectives?
So close the loop, make sure the communication is effective. But how do we measure that?
We have so many tools. Email tracking, see who's opening messages, website analytics for online content, social media analytics to see what people are saying and how far the message is reaching.
So use data to make communication smarter and more targeted. And if something isn't working, we can adjust. Now, speaking of adjusting, how do we handle those unexpected changes in projects, like scope changes, timeline shifts, even changes in technology?
Change is inevitable, but handling it well is crucial. When communicating change to stakeholders, be transparent.
I'm all about honesty. What does that look like in action?
Clearly explain why the change is happening and how it might affect the project. Don't try to downplay it. People appreciate honesty, even when it's hard to hear.
Be upfront and straightforward, even when it's tough. And involving stakeholders in the process, when possible, can make things easier, right?
Absolutely. When people feel part of the solution, they're more likely to support the change. And because change can be unsettling, give them clear information. What's changing, when, and how it will affect them.
Give them what they need to understand and adapt, and address concerns quickly and honestly to maintain that trust.
For sure. Give them a chance to ask questions, share their concerns, and get clear answers. And celebrate successes along the way.
I love that. We talked about celebrating before, but why is it especially important when dealing with change?
Change can be hard, so celebrating even small wins helps boost morale and keep things moving. Recognize those who embrace the change. It shows we're all in this together.
It creates a positive and supportive environment. Now, we can't talk about communication today without talking about technology. It's changed everything, including instructional design.
Yes, true. Technology can be a game changer if we use it right. Online platforms especially, these streamline collaboration and information sharing.
Think about it. No more endless email chains or trying to get everyone in the same room. Project management software, cloud documents, video conferencing, it all keeps everyone connected and on the same page.
Exactly. It makes communication more efficient, more accessible, and even a little fun.
I love that. And social media can be a powerful tool too, right? Not just for fun anymore.
Absolutely. LinkedIn, Twitter, even industry forums. You can share updates, give feedback, and build a community around your projects.
So it's not just broadcasting, it's creating space for conversation and engagement.
Right. Social media makes things more human, makes stakeholders feel like they're part of something bigger. And data analytics. We can see who's opening emails, visiting websites, engaging on social media.
So we're using data to measure our impact and make better decisions about our communication. Now, not all stakeholders are created equal. We've talked about tricky conversations and managing expectations, but some stakeholders are just difficult.
Oh, every project has them. The skeptical ones, the ones who resist change or love to criticize. But even then, communication can turn a difficult relationship into a good one.
Okay, how do we approach those situations to minimize frustration and actually get through to them?
First, try to understand them. What are they worried about? What motivates them? What's behind their behavior?
So take a step back and see their perspective, even if you don't agree with it.
Exactly. Once you understand where they're coming from, you can tailor your communication to address their concerns.
Find common ground. Build that shared understanding.
Right. And building trust with difficult stakeholders takes time. Be patient, be consistent in your communication, and follow through on your promises.
Be someone they can count on.
Yes. Respect their time and opinions, even if you disagree.
Show that you value them.
Exactly. Be good at your job, show your expertise, and that you can deliver great results.
Be prepared. Be knowledgeable.
And admit when you're wrong. We all make mistakes. Owning up to them builds trust. And be open to feedback, even when it's hard to hear.
It's about being willing to learn.
Exactly. Trust is a process, but it's the foundation of every good relationship. When they trust you, they'll be more open to your ideas and will want to collaborate.
Create an environment where everyone feels heard and valued. That's how projects succeed. Now, one last thing before we wrap up. Cultural awareness. We often work with people from different backgrounds, and that can lead to communication problems.
You're right. Cultural awareness is so important, it's not optional anymore.
How do we become more culturally aware? What are some practical tips for navigating those differences?
Start by looking at yourself. What are your own cultural biases and assumptions? We all have them. Think about how those biases might be affecting how you communicate and understand things.
So check yourself. Make sure you're not imposing your cultural norms on others.
Right. Do your research, too. Learn about the cultures you're working with, their customs, values, and communication styles.
Be curious. Try to understand.
Yes. And be respectful of those differences, even if you don't fully get them. What's polite in one culture might be rude in another.
Be sensitive. Adapt your communication. Some cultures are very direct. Others are more subtle.
Exactly. And building trust across cultures takes time. Be patient, ask questions, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. We all learn from them.
Be humble and open. Now, we talked about setting realistic expectations, but how do we do that specifically for instructional design projects?
Managing expectations is ongoing, and it takes clear communication and collaboration.
Okay, break it down for us. How do we set those realistic expectations right from the start?
Be transparent about the whole instructional design process. Explain how it works, the phases, the timelines, what can affect those timelines.
So educate stakeholders about the reality, not just the finished product.
Exactly. And be clear about the scope. What are you delivering? What are you not delivering? That prevents scope creep later.
Set boundaries. Make sure everyone agrees on what's possible, given the time and budget.
Yes. Get stakeholders involved in the planning. Get their input on goals, timeline, and deliverables.
Make them feel like part of the team.
Exactly. When people are invested, they're more supportive and understanding if there are problems. And communicate regularly throughout the project. Share updates on progress, challenges, changes to the plan.
Keep the dialogue going.
Right. And respond to their questions and concerns. Show that you're there to support them.
Be available and approachable. But what about when expectations need to change? Like when timelines shift or the scope needs to be adjusted? Those are tough conversations.
Be honest and transparent, even when it's hard. If the timeline or scope needs to change, communicate it clearly and explain why.
Be upfront, even when it's not what they want to hear.
Right, and answer their questions, address their concerns. Change is unsettling, so be empathetic and supportive.
Show them that you understand. Now, on to something that might not be as exciting, but is so important, documentation. It's a lifesaver, right, for stakeholder communication.
Documentation. Oh, it's your best friend, for sure. Might not be the most fun, but so worth it. Transparency, accountability, organization, it's all there.
Okay, sell me on it. What kind of documentation do we need? For instructional design projects, specifically.
You got to have a project charter. It's the blueprint, goals, scope, timeline, who's involved, who does what. Everything's there.
So the go-to document to get everyone on the same page. What else?
A communication plan. How you'll talk to everyone. How often. Which channels for what type of message. The key things you'll share.
A roadmap for communication. Keeps everyone in the loop.
Exactly. And meeting minutes. So important. You capture the decisions, the action items from meetings.
Make sure everyone remembers what was discussed, what they agreed to, who's doing what.
Yeah. And status reports, regular updates on the project, the achievements, the challenges, any risks.
Keeps stakeholders informed about how it's all going, good and bad. What about all that feedback we get?
Got to track that too. A feedback log. Everything goes in. Date, who gave the feedback, a summary, and what decisions are made based on it.
A central place for feedback. Nothing gets lost. I love how all this documentation creates a record, a clear history of the project.
Yeah. It's like insurance. If any questions come up later. Now, let's talk about trust, the foundation of any good relationship.
Oh, it's everything. Without trust, communication falls apart, collaboration doesn't work, projects can fail. How do we build that trust with our stakeholders? What's the secret?
Honesty. Be transparent, always, even when it's hard. People respect that, even if they don't like the news.
So no sugarcoating, no hiding the bad stuff. Be upfront about challenges.
Exactly. Be reliable, too. Do what you say you'll do, when you say you'll do it.
Be accountable. Show them they can count on you. What else?
Respect their time and opinions, even when you disagree.
Show that you value their input.
Yes. And be competent. Show them your skills, your expertise, that you can get the job done right.
Be prepared, be knowledgeable.
And admit when you mess up. Everyone makes mistakes. Owning up to them builds trust. Be open to feedback, even if it's hard to hear.
Be willing to learn and grow.
Exactly. Trust takes time, but it's the key. When stakeholders trust you, they're more open to your ideas, they'll support you, and they'll collaborate better.
That's the environment we want. Where everyone feels heard and respected, that's how projects succeed. Now, last thing before we wrap up. Cultural awareness. We work with people from all over, and that can lead to miscommunication.
You're so right. Cultural awareness is essential now.
How do we become more aware? Any tips for navigating those cross-cultural interactions?
Start with yourself. What are your biases? Your assumptions? We all have them. Think about how they might be affecting you.
Check yourself. Don't assume everyone sees the world the same way.
Exactly. And learn about the cultures you're working with.
Yeah.
Their customs, values, how they communicate.
Be curious and open-minded.
Yes. And respect those differences, even if you don't understand them. Something polite in one culture could be offensive in another.
Be sensitive. Adapt your communication. Some cultures are direct, others are more indirect.
Exactly. Building trust across cultures takes time. Be patient, ask questions, and learn from your mistakes.
Be humble. Be open to learning. Now, we talked about setting realistic expectations. How do we do that in instructional design, specifically?
It's an ongoing process. You have to communicate clearly and work together.
Okay, what are some specific ways to set those realistic expectations from the beginning?
Be completely transparent about the whole process. Explain how instructional design works, the phases, typical timelines, things that can affect those timelines.
So educate stakeholders about the reality, not just the end product.
Right. And be clear about the scope. What are you doing? What are you not doing? That prevents those "but I thought" conversations later on.
Set those boundaries. Make sure everyone knows what's possible with the time and money we have.
Yes. Involve them in the planning, too. Get their input on the goals, timeline, deliverables.
Make them feel like part of the team.
Exactly. When people are invested, they're more supportive and understanding if there are problems. And communicate throughout the whole project. Give updates on the progress, the challenges, any changes.
Keep that dialogue open.
Yes. And be responsive. Answer their questions. Address their concerns. Show them you're there to support them.
Be available. Be approachable. But what happens when expectations have to change? Like timeline changes, scope adjustments. Those are tough.
Honesty and transparency are key. If something needs to change, communicate it clearly and explain why.
Be upfront, even when it's not the news they want to hear.
Right. Answer their questions, address their concerns. Change is hard, so be empathetic and supportive.
Show that you understand. Now let's talk about something less glamorous, but but so important: documentation. It's a lifesaver, right, for stakeholder communication.
Oh, it is. Documentation is key. Not always fun, but essential. It keeps things clear, Transparent, everyone knows what's going on.
Okay, I'm convinced. But what types of documentation should we focus on for instructional design?
A project charter. That's your foundation. It outlines everything: goals, scope, timeline, who's involved, their roles. The blueprint.
So everyone's on the same page from the start.
Yeah.
What else?
You need a communication plan, too. It lays out how you'll communicate with stakeholders, how often you'll touch base, which channels you'll use for different types of messages, the key things you'll share throughout the project.
Like a roadmap for all your communication. Keeps everyone in the loop and makes sure things are consistent.
Exactly. And don't forget meeting minutes. They're crucial for capturing decisions made in meetings, any action items that come up. It keeps everyone accountable.
Right, so everyone has a clear record of what was discussed, agreed upon, and who's responsible for what. What about those regular updates we need to give?
Status reports. They're how you keep stakeholders informed about the project's progress. Highlight your achievements, but also be upfront about any challenges or potential risks.
So transparency is key, even when things aren't perfect. It builds trust. And what about all that feedback we collect? How do we manage that?
You need a system, a feedback log. It captures every piece of feedback you get. The date, who gave it, a summary of the main points, and any decisions made because of that feedback.
So nothing falls through the cracks. It's all documented. And it can be really helpful later on if any questions or issues pop up.
Exactly. It's your record, your evidence. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about trust. It's the foundation of any good relationship, and that includes our relationships with stakeholders.
Trust is everything. Without it, communication breaks down, collaboration suffers, and projects can go off the rails. How do we build that trust?
Honesty is crucial. Be transparent in your communication, even when it's difficult. Tell it like it is. Stakeholders appreciate that, even if they don't love the news.
So no sugarcoating. Be upfront, even when it's bad news.
Right, and be reliable. Do what you say you'll do, when you say you'll do it. Follow through on your commitments. Show them that your word means something.
Be someone they can count on. What else?
Respect their time and opinions, even when you don't see eye to eye. It's not about being a pushover. It's about recognizing that they have valuable perspectives.
It shows that you value their input and that you're willing to listen even when you disagree.
Exactly. And be competent. Demonstrate your expertise. Let them see that you're capable of delivering quality work.
Show up prepared, knowledgeable, and ready to contribute.
Yes. And it's okay to admit when you make mistakes. We all do. Owning up to them actually builds trust. It shows that you're human and that you're committed to learning.
It shows humility that you don't have all the answers. And being open to feedback, even when it's tough to hear, is so important too.
It shows that you're committed to growth. Remember, building trust takes time. It's a process. Be patient, be consistent, and be genuine. It will pay off.
When stakeholders trust you, they're more willing to collaborate, to support your ideas, and to work with you to achieve those shared goals. So, to wrap up this incredible deep dive, let's recap some key takeaways for our listeners.
We've talked about understanding your audience, setting clear goals, using visuals, navigating difficult conversations, and embracing technology to make communication easier and more effective.
And honestly, I feel so much more prepared to tackle these communication challenges now.
That's great to hear. The most important thing is to remember that communication is a process. It's ongoing. It's about building relationships, fostering trust, and keeping those lines of communication open.
So make communication a priority. It's the key to creating a collaborative, productive, and successful environment for your instructional design projects.
Absolutely. And don't forget those 6 key strategies we outlined earlier. Establishing clear objectives, regular check-ins, visual communication, a structured feedback mechanism, collaborative problem solving, and educating your stakeholders about how instructional design works.
Those are your building blocks for success.
And remember, these skills aren't just for instructional design. They apply to any field where you're working with others.
So whether you're collaborating on a software project, a marketing campaign, or even planning a family vacation, these principles of clear communication, empathy, and active listening are essential.
They really are. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. Think back to a recent project or one that's going on right now and ask yourself, which of these strategies could I use or do better to improve communication and make things run smoother?
It's a question we should all ask ourselves regularly. Every project is a chance to learn and grow. By always looking for ways to improve our communication, we can create better learning experiences for everyone.
So well said. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into stakeholder communication.
It's been a pleasure chatting with you today, and thanks to our listeners for joining us on this journey. We hope you found it valuable.
It's been a pleasure. Remember, effective communication is a journey. It's a skill you can develop and improve over time. So keep learning, keep growing, and keep those communication lines open.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, we'll say goodbye for today. Until next time, happy communicating.